Colleagues, welcome back to the office. It's Steve, and welcome to the CPE Today podcast. We're going to get started with our podcast presentation here just in a moment. But before we do, I'd like to share some insight on how you can receive credit for watching today's presentation. There are two options. You can either watch live as it's being recorded through Zoom. More on that here in a moment. Or you could be watching or listening on demand wherever you happen to receive content. We distribute our show through YouTube, SoundCloud, Facebook, our website, and many other places. Now, if you happen to be watching on demand on your own schedule, after watching or listening to today's class, head on over to cpetoday.com and locate today's course page. You can find our course code by looking at the footer of the presentation to see the link presented there, and it will also be mentioned throughout the presentation on multiple occasions. After purchasing today's class, you'll complete a short 5-question quiz on what was discussed in today's presentation. And upon passing that, your certificate for your CPE credits will be automatically generated and available for download. In addition to your purchase, you can also download copies of today's presentation, learning materials. You can ask the presenter questions and more. Now, if you happen to be watching live as it's being recorded through Zoom, your attendance will be confirmed through attendance prompts, which will occur every 12 to 20 minutes and approximately 4 per hour. They'll pop up automatically, and when a prompt comes up, please choose a response to confirm your attendance. It doesn't actually matter what you choose as long as you choose something, as your response will confirm your engagement with our presentation. Attendance prompts might not be announced, so please keep an eye out for them. Now, as long as you've completed at least 75% of the attendance prompts, you will receive full credit for our presentation. Your completion certificate will be delivered to you by email within 2 business days of the event. You can always visit cpetoday.com if you have any questions or issues with your certificate. After our presentation today, we'd love to know what you think. There will be a course evaluation that will automatically pop up. It should take you anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes to complete, and your feedback will be used to help us produce better content in the future. Now, if you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, we'd love to know what they are. Please use the chat or the Q&A functionality to let us know what you think, or if you have any questions on the materials that are being presented. Also, please feel free to share your experience, knowledge, and insight with the class. If you have any technical issues, you can also use that functionality to ask for help. You can always find great content at cpetoday.com. We have a variety of self-study and live courses from all topics: accounting, audit, personal development, Excel, QuickBooks, and more, you name it. Check out cpetoday.com. And the CPE Today podcast is made available Tuesdays and Fridays at 11 a.m. Pacific. And you can always find great content being discussed in that podcast every single week. If you happen to be a new user, listener, viewer of the CPE Today podcast, thank you so much for coming. Welcome. We're ecstatic and happy to have you. How about you get a free credit on us? Use coupon code ONEFREEPODCAST at checkout to get a free credit for today's class. We're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation here in the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy our presentation. Now, according to Gardner, visual data discovery, a defining feature of the modern BI platform, began in 2004 and has since transformed the market and buying new trends away from IT-centric system of record and reporting to business-centric agile analytics. What this tells us is that really kind of the modern trend that we see with business intelligence platforms began in 2004. Prior to this, as I told you, these solutions have been around for a long time, but they were really only intended for large organizations, and they were usually ran out of the IT team. Now, what we can see is that there's a big shift to business value and having them run out of business teams. Modern BI and analytics platforms are characterized by easy-to-use tools that support a full range of analytic workflow capabilities that do not require significant involvement in IT in order to predefine data models upfront as a prerequisite to analysis. And really kind of what this speaks to is these tools should be easy, they should be approachable, they should already have the data pre-calculated and available for us to be able to work, and we should be able to do this as business people without having to have a degree in computer science to be able to calculate and be able to use it effectively. So good news is the solutions we're going to talk about today, for the most part, all meet these characteristics. Power BI, Tableau, they're pretty easy to use. I will point out they're not games. They're not like Farmville or Mario Kart here. So they do require knowledge to be able to use, but they're, for the people who have at least the base level knowledge, they're pretty easy to be able to use. Okay, they have a huge range of workflow capabilities built into them, and you can get started without having to have a huge investment of time from your IT team to get your data models already set up and calculated. Now, the more you have on this, the better, but you don't have to have huge upfront investments to be able to make this work. Now, we have a number of tools available to us as business professionals. One such tool that we all love, I'm assuming we all love it, I love it, hopefully you love it too, is Microsoft Excel. Okay, so I would tell you, for a lot of reasons, Excel is probably my go-to application for everything. I would say it's the de facto tool, not only for business intelligence reporting, but really for any type of project and more. With respect to this incredible tool, it is something that we could do sales reports with, that we could use. We could do expense reporting, we can do pivot tables, we could do charts, we can do graphs, we can do maps. There's a legacy tool called Power View, which I'll mention, but I'm not going to spend any time demonstrating, because why would you use it these days when we have Power BI? But previously it had a lot of business, and still does, has a lot of business intelligence capability built into it. And for me, like, if I don't know what tool I'm going to use, I'm going to go ahead and use a Excel worksheet, mostly just because if it's in Excel, I can take it and I can put it into other tools. Okay, if it's a spreadsheet, it's analyzed, it is structured, it's something that you could work with. So I would say it's kind of that de facto tool, just because of its structured data, and it makes it more effective and easy than something unstructured like a Word file or a text file or something else like there. However, it's not a bad thing, but there are a number of features that are needed in a BI solution that are not going to be present necessarily directly in Excel or is easily accessible. Excel answers a different problem than what business intelligence kind of goes through. Okay, so Excel is really good and provides some characteristics of a BI solution, including things like ODBC, open database connectivity, so we can hook Excel up to other spreadsheets and be able to report from those spreadsheets and be able to extract that data from those spreadsheets and the like. Excel offers tables, sorting, and filtering. Tables are fantastic for being able to work and operate inside of Excel. You could do really easy sorting, filtering. They've also got these new dynamic array formulas that are really nifty as well that you can consider using. Okay, you can do charting, graphing, mapping. They're all present there. Okay, but the limitations are really kind of apparent, especially as you start to look at what BI can do for you. Okay, specifically around distribution, security, sharing. Excel is a file. You have to have that file open in your computer. You have to have Excel installed. It's not something that you, for example, can just view on your phone, or at least easily get on your phone if you wanted to. It's just not something that is easily apparent there. Okay. And yes, you can design dashboards. I do it all the time inside of Excel, but it's not business intelligence. Okay. So what business platforms are out there? And from my perspective, there's really just three that are worth mentioning that are probably, and I'll point out there are a lot of other ones that are out there as well. But here are the three that I would really kind of recommend. Okay. What we're going to talk about primarily today is Power BI Desktop and PowerBI.com. Okay. Now, why didn't Microsoft just extend Excel? Okay. There are a lot of different reasons for that. Again, probably the biggest answer is Excel is a spreadsheet tool. That's not what business intelligence is about. Okay. Rather than kind of just make Excel bigger, what they did was they created a separate standalone application, the Power BI desktop application, PowerBI.com. There's actually three different types of Power BI, which we'll talk about. There's a desktop tool, a web service tool, and then a mobile app. You can use one, you can use two, you can use all three if you'd like. Okay. And these were designed to kind of get around some of the existing limitations of what you would find in that traditional Excel environment, really, and it's trying to resolve some of the limitations around sharing and the distribution of those resources that you might want to get. Okay. These tools provide outstanding capabilities, very, very approachable, easy to use, reasonably priced. You can get it for free even if you're using the personal license here. And it's a great way of being able to learn the tool with no upfront cost. And what's also great about it, one of the big reasons I like this particular solution is that you can get started here and it's already going to feel somewhat familiar to you because Microsoft has been using the ribbon interface and certain capabilities inside of these tools that are going to be the same inside of Power BI as they are in like in Excel, like for example, Power Query or DAX or Power Pivot. Those functionalities are really, for all intents and purposes, the same inside of Power BI. And so, for us, the learning curve being able to implement this type of technology is actually quite easy compared to learning something completely different, like for Tableau, Qlik, or another tool out there. The ability to publish completed dashboards to the web is a huge benefit that you get with respect to Power BI. Okay. Now there is the desktop application, then there's the Power BI web service. The Power BI web service is how we distribute these dashboards and keep them up to date for other people. We author the report in the Power BI desktop, and then we ultimately publish that desktop report to the Power BI service, which then distributes it to the rest of our company. Okay. And then it'll keep that device, that file up to date, if we follow that right once, refresh many mantra. Okay. Can't do that with Excel. Okay. It's not that Excel, you can't distribute those files, but when you distribute an Excel file, everybody has their own version of that document. And because they have their own version of that document, any changes, modifications that they make are only going to be on their document. Okay. With Power BI, when I make a change to a report or I change how an analytic is generated or presented, everybody gets that update simultaneously. And we all know that we're working from the same data set and we all have access to the same information. And it allows for that kind of centralization with respect to how we're going to manage that document. Okay, so very, very useful from a distribution perspective. Okay. Now, the way Power BI works, you kind of have multiple different levels of your report. You've got a, let's call it the data level, the model level, and then you've got like the actual report level. Okay. The report level, which is what we're seeing here, is a collection of different tiles. You should think of the report as being a canvas. You are the painter. You have a palette of different types of visualizations, bar charts, maps, graphs, all different types of stuff, KPIs, AI tools, and the like. And you can drag those different visualizations to the report and do different types of calculations on them. Okay. And you could design this report any way you want. What's kind of cool with this too is once this report is published to the Power BI service, okay, your staff, once they have access to this report, can pin those different visualizations to the to like their own report. They basically can self-service at this point in time. What's kind of nifty with this is that once I've created this report and you have access to it, you can be like, oh, you know what? I really like this report. I want this chart. I want this map. And you can create your own. And Power BI, as most business intelligence tools do, they mash data up coming from multiple different layers. And what I mean by that is that with Power BI, again, you're not limited to the traditional nature of how for example, how a balance sheet or an income statement needs to be presented. Okay, if you want to put sales data next to payroll data, next to social media data, next to your open rate for your company's newsletter, because you're the marketing manager and this is helpful information for you, guess what? You can do that. There's nobody going to be, from the Financial Accounting Standards Board coming here to tell you can't do that. Okay, you can make a report dashboard, anything that you want it to be, to ultimately get you the information that you need to ultimately make a better decision inside your business. And we're going to do lots of examples here of how we create these different dashboards in a little bit. Now, there are two other tools that are worth mentioning, two other tools that are worth checking out. Okay, my next highest recommendation as it relates to business intelligence is going to be Tableau. Okay, Tableau forever has been a leader in the BI market. As I mentioned, in a lot of ways, they made this consumer-focused, easier, more approachable way of generating business intelligence. And according to Gartner, they've got a great set of tools for creating and sharing dashboards across all sizes. Okay, further, they got purchased by Salesforce. That kind of acquisition, is going to make it, I think, have better integration, especially with other Salesforce products. We're probably going to see integration with Tableau with lots of other things here in the future. I will also point out they changed from a perpetual license to a subscription model, which makes it more affordable for most businesses. Most businesses previously were having to buy this, and I will point out that it was quite expensive. Tableau under the previous model, I would say, was somewhere around, I'm going to say about $700 per user per license. And that was quite expensive, as you can imagine. Okay. Well, now with the subscription model of this, it is much, much more affordable with respect to what you can get with this. There are 3 different licenses of this. There's the creator, the explorer, and the viewer. And ultimately, you have to ask yourself is like, what type of user am I? Am I a user that is going to need to create data? Am I a user that needs to explore and be able to look at data coming from different places? Or do I just need to be able to consume the information that is presented? Okay. And you could pick whatever license obviously makes the most sense for you and what you're doing. You can also mix and match your licenses several different ways inside your business and buying the appropriate licenses for what people need to do inside your organization. Okay, so I would say, though, for the people who are here, you're going to definitely be on this creator side, having to create different reports. You're definitely going to need the more expensive license. And at $70 per month, I'm going to point out that is $60 more expensive than what you're going to get with Power BI. Okay, here's an example of what a Tableau dashboard looks like. Same type of thing. You generate your data sources, and then from those data sources, you go and you create the different reports that you would like. And the reports can be summarized however you'd like to see them summarized. They can include things like, for example, charts, maps, graphs, and the like. So, you can definitely do some pretty cool stuff with Tableau. I don't mean to be disparaging of the product at all, because I'm not. It's just a little bit different with respect to how and where you would leverage this capability. Okay, a third product that is worth mentioning here is going to be Qlik. Okay, now Qlik offers a large set of tools of all different types of analytics, and it's useful for all different types of businesses. Qlik price ranges from free to $25. They have a free version of their business intelligence platform as well. They also offer on-premise solutions that also range from free to $1,500 per what they call their tokens as well. And they also sell subscriptions to their data. Okay, so Qlik, the free version of Qlik, is pretty cool. You can do some pretty cool stuff with it. They've got some really useful and interesting business intelligence platform applications and more that you can consider using as well. Alrighty, so here is an example of a Qlik dashboard and what that could potentially look like for you. Now, I got to say, for all of these, though, I think Power BI looks the best. I've used them all. I teach them all. If anybody here wants to learn one of these platforms, I can give you hands-on for that exact one. But there's a reason why we talk about Power BI so much. And it's not just that it's a Microsoft product. It's that it's really probably the best, in my opinion, overall. Alrighty, so that does bring us to the end of chapter 1 here, and we're going to go ahead and move on here just in a minute, and we're going to go ahead and start here with chapter 2, which is going to be business intelligence with Microsoft Excel. And really what I want to do in this particular section is introduce some of the really cool things that you can do inside of the Excel application. Now, before I do move on, I've left the last polling question open, which is poll number 5 here. Somebody hasn't responded to it. You just need to respond to 75% of these. So if you miss one, don't sweat it. Unfortunately, I have no idea who didn't respond. It just tells me 13 out of 14 of you have not. So I'm going to close this here in about the next 30 seconds or so and bring up our next one, just so we can stay on top of these things. But again, when you hear that ding, that lets you know if there's a polling question, go ahead and respond to it. But if you haven't responded to it, it should have, if you already did, it would have gone away. But if you still have this box open, that means you didn't respond to it. I'm sorry. I don't like particularly having to do these polling questions, but it's a requirement from NASBA. So if you haven't seen this last one, yeah, you might want to respond to it. But let's go ahead and have our next one here. So I'm going to close this. Okay. Okay. And then here is our next polling question. All right. So let's go ahead and dive here into the second chapter. And we're going to go ahead and talk through in chapter 2 here some fundamental business intelligence that we can do with Microsoft Excel. Okay. With respect to Microsoft Excel, it is the de facto business platform for pretty much everything. And it's something that I use and love and work with all the time, as I'm sure you guys do as well. And there are some fundamental steps that we can do inside of Excel that I think are very useful and effective for us to be able to master. And really, I want to kind of present this in a couple of different ways. And the first part is changing some of the fundamental nature that you are utilizing inside of Excel to kind of get you more in a BI-focused track for reporting. Okay. Now, with respect to Excel, everything ultimately should be brought in dynamically using Power Query, which is a tool we'll talk about here in a little bit. Power Query, if you're not familiar with it, is an incredible application for importing in data and for creating dynamic data sources that can be easily understood and easily repeatable and easily refreshed. With respect to Power BI, I mean, you can do some incredible stuff with this tool that you can hook it up virtually to any data source, other Excel workbooks. You could hook it up to databases. You could hook it up to a REST API and the like. And this kind of query allows you to link this both to Excel and Power BI. This same functionality lives in both places here. And then have Excel essentially query that data for you. And what's cool about it is that it will allow us to be able to extract that data automatically going forward. It allows for that refreshing, repeatable features and functionality of being able to work with that information. And so I would tell you, when we start wanting to do stuff with Excel, building these from data queries rather than exported reports is going to be hugely important for that refreshability of our reports. If we don't do it this way, we won't be able to create live reports. Now, from here, we want to be able to summarize the data. Okay. Now, summarizing the data, really what we're trying to do here is create some sort of calculation that allows us to be able to pull the data into a single resource, be able to understand that data a little bit better, and then be able to learn from that data. Okay, this could be, for example, pivot tables. It could be pivot charts, whatever it might end up being. Pivot tables is probably where most of us are going to end up with. Okay. Then we want to be able to sort and filter our data, be able to extract data in any order. We maybe want to be able to apply highlight rules, conditional formatting, and the like to be able to understand what we're working with and being able to be able to learn from this information and be able to filter down to a specific business unit, specific department, be able to sort our top providers or our top customers or our top employees, or figure out our low producers and the like. And then once this data has been extracted, summarized, and filtered and sorted, we want to provide some visualization so people can be able to learn. Okay, and that could be pivot charts, pivot tables, conditional formatting, spark lines, and the like. You can build lots of cool dashboards inside of Excel. It doesn't help you with the distribution side of those dashboards, but you can certainly do a lot of really nifty things inside of this. Okay. For this chapter 2, let's go ahead and start to explore some of the different things that we can do inside of inside of Excel that are really kind of fundamental with respect to us being able to operate. Okay. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over here, and we're going to spend the rest of this chapter doing hands-on work inside of Excel, and I'm going to show you some different really useful things that we can consider using. Just as a reminder, there are polling questions to confirm your attendance, so please, again, make sure you respond to those. Alrighty, you should be seeing my screen, and as a reminder here, we are following along with our sample files that are presented, and we are going to do this through chapter 2 here. And we're going to go ahead and start off with taking a look at what it means to create a ODBC connection to be able to query our data. Okay. Now for this one, I'm just going to start off here with a blank workbook. And what I want to talk about first is going to be a tool that we'll explore more in the third chapter here, which is going to be Power Query. But I want to get you acquainted to where Power Query is and what it means to leverage this incredible tool. Okay, so Power Query is going to be a tool that's going to live over here under the left-hand side. You'll see the data ribbon, and it's going to be something that lives over here on the left-hand side under Get and Transform. Okay, and so there's two work groups here. There's Get and Transform, and then there's another section over here called Queries and Connections. And these two work groups allow us to be able to hook Excel up to an external data source and be able to pull that data in dynamically. Okay, so with respect to this, we can be able to pull in data from other Excel workbooks, Access database, and more. And we can even pull in data using a tool called ODBC, Open Database Connectivity. With ODBC, we can be able to pull in data from a number of different data sources that are out there, including ERP platforms. We can pull in data from accounting solutions and more. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the different ones that you could potentially use this for. But the importance of this is that with this tool, we can connect Excel to live data. And then from that live data, when we update our reports, it's going back to wherever that live data was, and it's dynamically retrieving the most up-to-date information possible. Okay. Now this tool does a lot of different things. In chapter 3, we're going to explore, and I'm going to teach you some of the incredible tools that you could do with it. But let's just do a really simple example here just to get started, and then we'll take a look at some of the more advanced things that we can consider using. Now from here, we're going to go ahead and select Get Data from Database, and then we're going to go ahead and select the Microsoft Access database. And as provided as part of our materials here today, okay, under chapter 2, you'll see there's the extreme accounting database, and we can go ahead and we can connect to this. Now what Power Query is doing is actually creating a connection out, and it's allowing us to be able to view this database. Okay, let me just switch over real quick before we get started here to show you this. Now we're using Access database as an example here with respect to some of what a database might be. Microsoft Access isn't a perfect example of what a true blue database would do inside your business, but it's better than nothing. It's also pretty easy to be able to distribute here. And inside of a database, what you have are a collection of tables, okay? And tables are a collection of information. In this particular instance here, we've got a customer table, an employee table, address table, so on and so forth. And tables are like spreadsheets. Okay, a workbook contains a collection of worksheets. Worksheets contain a collection of rows and columns. Rows and columns represent a bunch of cells. And it's the exact same thing with a database. A database is a collection of tables. Tables are a collection of rows and columns. Rows and columns are a collection of cells. The big difference between a database and a workbook, an Excel workbook, is formality. Okay, database is really formal. It's going to have rules, it's going to have structure, it's going to have specific things that you can and cannot do in the context of that database. But here we can see that we can easily be able to see that information is here and present. And with respect to how this database operates in this particular one, it's showing us, customers, it's showing us financials, orders, and the like. Okay. And when we talk about utilizing Power Query to be able to access this data is what our systems are using. This data is what our, for example, what our accounting system is storing, our ERP system is storing. And we're connecting directly to where this is, and we're pulling this data out. So we don't have to run a report, okay, and then run that report inside of Excel and then clean up that report to Excel to make it available for processing. All of that work is being done dynamically for us right inside of Power Query. And our accounting system, our ERP system, is continuously getting new orders, it's continuously getting new information, new customers, new signups. All of that is going to continue to exist here, and the system will continue to update and operate, but we're basically just going to be able to create that information and be able to pull that data in. But it'll live wherever it was supposed to live and will continue to be updated accordingly. So with Power Query, we get like a window into our different accounting solutions, and this allows us to be able to pull some stuff in here. Now, for our purposes here, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to create a multi-query connection. And from this multi-query connection, we're going to be able to and create a pivot table from a couple of different resources from here. Okay. And if you need me to do this demonstration more than once, again, I'm more than happy to do so. Just go ahead and let me know if this is making sense or not. So we're in our extreme accounting database here, and we want to be able to see what the heck is going on inside of our business. And we can click on any one of these things. It's going to give us a preview of what that data looks like coming directly from that database. And so here's our customers, here's our employees, so on and so forth. And we can pull this data directly into Power Query, which then ultimately will make it available to Excel. Now, if we want to bring in a single table, and I'm going to do this a couple of times, mostly just so you can see it being done a couple of times, we can click, for example, the customer table here, and we can come down here to load, transform, and cancel, and we can go ahead and click load. And what that will do is it will dump that data directly into our Excel workbook. And here we go. This is exactly the data from our Access database is now inside of Excel. If we switch back over here to Excel and we look at our customer database, okay, we've got Aruba Sports down under bikes, Kangaroo Trikes, so on and so forth. And if we put these into the correct order, we'd end up seeing those in those correct places as well. Okay. And so with respect to this, let's go ahead and put it in the correct order. City cyclists, pathfinders, bikeaholics. There we go. So if we made an update in one, it would be present in the other. And Excel can just pull this data down dynamically, and you can do whatever type of calculations you want inside of this, and it will go ahead and do it for you. Now, what's kind of cool about this is that we can create a multi-table query where we actually pull down multiple data sets, and then we can create a pivot table that will ultimately be able to report upon 3 or 4 different things at the same time. Now, I'm going to show you a much more broken down version as our first way of getting started, and then we're going to kind of build upon this and create some more complicated examples here. Okay, so we've pulled down our customer table. Let's come on over here and do that exact same thing again. Get data from database, from Access, and let's go ahead and pull down 2 other tables, which are going to be the order and the order detail table. Okay, so we can go ahead here and click the order table. We'll go ahead and load that table in. It's also going to create a worksheet for us. Okay. Oops, where did we go? Do that one more time. Load to, and we're going to go ahead and just load this to a new worksheet. I want you to be able to see all 3 of these. Okay, so here's our order, and then we're going to come on over here and we'll do this one more time. We're going to go grab our orders detail. Okay, so get data from database, from Access, and we're going to go ahead and select that extreme accounting database again. And we're going to go ahead and select our order detail, and we're going to go ahead and select load to. And we're going to go ahead and tell it to create a new worksheet and create a table for us. Okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and delete this unnecessary sheet 1. All right. So we have 3 different worksheets here, and these are actually coming from 3 different tables inside of our database: the customer table, the order table, and then the order details table. Okay. Now this data is live. I mean, right away, you should hopefully some buzzers should be going off in your head on how you could use this for your normal reporting inside your business. The benefit of this being is that you don't have to go run the report. You're pulling the data dynamically in to this. Okay. Now that we've got these data in here, we can actually combine this information and we can create a multi-table pivot table. Let me ask you, have you ever wanted to create a pivot table for multiple different worksheets simultaneously? Like, have you ever gotten, for example, your order table here, and then you also wanted to maybe include product information or customer information when you go to create your pivot table? Okay. Anybody here ever tried to create a multi-worksheet pivot table? The answer is you probably I've thought about it, but one of the things that you've come across is that when you go to create a pivot table, as an example, it won't do it. And the reason being is that a pivot table has to be a single source. Okay, it has to only come from one place. Okay, what's kind of cool with Power Query, and then really kind of what this data modeling allows us to be able to do here, is it allows us to be able to create a data model, and then from that data model, we can create a pivot table from multiple worksheets concurrently. Now, this is going to take a little bit of work for us to get set up here, but bear with me, and we're going to go ahead and work through this. We're going to create a pivot table from the customer worksheet, the order detail worksheet, and the order worksheet in and of itself. Okay. And what we're going to do to get this up and running is we're going to make our active worksheet the orders worksheet. And then from the data, from the insert tab, we're going to go ahead from the far left, select this last option here that says pivot table. And from this, notice that when we go to create this, it's actually not saying, orders worksheet A1 through, M5532. It actually just says the name of the table, in this case, the order table. Okay. I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Anytime that you're going to create a pivot table, you 1000% want to create a table from that data first for a lot of different reasons. The biggest of which is if that information's inside the table, it's going to be inside the scope of the pivot table. And if you add new data to this table, like a new column or a new row, it'll automatically be included in that pivot table as well. So you definitely want to always create a table first. And then the next thing is, if you want to create a worksheet from a pivot table from multiple worksheets, when you go to create your pivot table, if you scroll down a little bit down here, you'll see this option that says add this data to this data model. Okay. Now what this does is it's going to add the current table plus any other table inside of your Excel workbook to the data model of that workbook. And the data model of the workbook is basically a collection of data inside of this workbook and how everything relates together. When we get into Power BI, there'll be a graphical view of this where you'll see an overview of all the different tables that are presented inside your workbook and how they all connect to each other. And that's what we refer to as that data model. But the big prerequisite here is that you've got to make sure that when you import this in or that you add this data to Excel, you create a table first and then you create your pivot table second. Okay. So clicking this option, we're going to click OK. And we're going to now be in the standard view of creating a pivot table. And from this pivot table, we can go ahead and we can create whatever type of pivot table that we would like and be able to learn from this information. Now, from here, we can do some really useful and helpful things with respect to kind of creating this pivot table. Okay. So let's come over here on the left. Okay. And let's go ahead and grab maybe our order date. We'll put that over here to our columns. Okay, let's go ahead and grab our payment received down here to values. Okay, and then let's just go ahead and grab, not our payment received, our order amount down here to values. There we go. And something's weird here. Steve, you mentioned that we could create a pivot table from multiple worksheets, but I'm just seeing the stuff that's in the order table that is presented here. Okay, what happened to the order detail and then also to the customer table? Okay. Can anybody tell me what's wrong? Or can anybody tell me where I should be going? Okay, Kim says click on all. And Kim, you are absolutely correct here. If we come up here to the top of our pivot table tool, you'll see that there's an option here that says active and all. Okay, if we change this from being active and we click this over here to be all, what we're going to actually see here is that we're going to see the other tables inside of our report. And the reason orders is listed there is because I accidentally didn't create a table from it. I actually created a connection. That was an accident. That normally shouldn't be there, so you can just ignore it for our purposes here. But if we click all, we'll see order details. We'll also see orders, and we'll see customers. And from here, what we can be able to do is that we can actually pull down and we can create and pull these different items into our report if we'd like. So if we pull customers down here, let's pull customer over here to rows. There we go. We can start to create a pivot table from those different sources. So Kim, I'm going to ask you, since you got the first question there right, why don't you tell me what the other issue is here? okay? Because I'm going to create my report, and this sure doesn't look accurate to me, because it really seems odd that every single customer bought exactly $259,390.64 from us, okay? I don't know. At least to me, that seems a little bit weird. So does anybody know what the other issue here that we're seeing? Okay. Well, the other issue is that we need to create relationships between these different data sources. If we hover over this pivot table, you'll see on the right-hand side here, it says relationship between tables is needed. Okay. Now, I'm going to pause for a second and just talk about this. This one simple thing is probably the linchpin that makes all of this work. And it's probably the thing I think most people get wrong. And it's also the thing that we see that most people get hung up on when they're trying to learn business intelligence and also learning to work with databases, is that, you know, they don't really get the concept of relationships and kind of pulling all this data together. This one simple thing with respect to relationships is not a difficult thing, but it's an absolutely necessary thing in order to be able to get your data to work correctly. So if we see over here on the left, okay, all of these numbers are being repeated. The reason being is that Excel, or later on when we look at Power BI, doesn't know how to map all this data together. It doesn't know how it all comes together. It doesn't know how it relates together. And we really need to tell it, like, you know, hey, here are the common fields between these tables, so that when you see order ID over here, or you see customer ID, or you see product ID, whatever it ends up being, between these two different tables, they mean the same thing. Okay. Those are what we refer to as the keys, or the relationship, for the basis of the relationships inside of the reporting. Okay, inside of databases, we have this thing called the primary key. We also have foreign keys. The primary key is going to be whatever defines the table. You know, if it's customer, it's going to be the customer ID. If it's a order table, it'll be the order ID. If you're looking at payments, it might be check ID or something else like that. But when we go to create dashboards, or we go to create pivot tables for multiple resources inside of Excel, we have to tell the application how these different things pair up with each other. And we have to tell the application how to map this all together. Okay. This is an absolute central principle of business intelligence. And it's something that if you don't get right away, we're going to do lots of different examples, but hopefully you'll understand the importance of it as we work through this process. Okay, so whether you're doing this in Excel or you're doing this in a high-powered Power BI workbook, you're going to need to go through this process. And this one central piece is the piece that holds a lot of people up. Now, sometimes you can click Auto Detect, and if it can find the relationships like it did here, it'll automatically map those in. I'm going to point out, set your expectations low. You won't be disappointed. In practice, in reality, 99 times out of 100, that won't work for you. Okay. So what I want to do is take a second here and actually show you, and let's go ahead and delete that relationship here, show you how to actually map these things together. Okay. Now to do so, what I want to show you first is I want you to see the keys. If we look over here under our order table, you'll see that there is a column called customer ID. Okay. And if we look over here under our customer table, we'll come back over here. You'll see there's a column called customer ID. What we want to tell Excel in this case, or it'd be Power BI, is that when you see in the customer table, customer ID, and you see in the order table, customer ID, those two are the same. Link them together, create a relationship. Now there's lots of different styles of relationship. We have one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, many-to-one. We don't need to get into those specifics now at the moment here, but the hardest part that I personally have seen teaching this for so many years is just for people to understand this principle that you have to tell the application when you see customer ID in one table and you see customer ID in the other table, they're the same thing. Inside of our pivot table, what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to the pivot table analyze, and we're going to go ahead from the calculations work group menu. We're going to go ahead and check the relationships option. Okay, it's going to pop up this little window here. From here, we're going to go ahead and click new. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to tell it how these different tables map out. Okay, you'll see it says table, it says related table. The table is your primary, and then related is the secondary information. Skipping ahead a little bit, you have dimension data and you have fact data. Fact data is what you're reporting upon. In this case, it would be the order table, and the dimension data would be something describing that. In that case, it could be the customer table. And so here we're going to go ahead and say orders is our data table, our primary. We're going to come over here to our customer table as our related table, and then we're going to go ahead and tell it when you see customer ID 1, it should be the same in the other. Okay, and then when we go ahead and we click OK here, that's when our pivot table actually starts to calculate and actually starts to show us the information that we're supposed to have here. And orders, customer, okay. And then what we also need to do here is we need to create another relationship, in this case between the orders detail, between the order ID column here, and then also between the order table to the order ID. Now, typically what you're going to need here is you're going to need at least one relationship for every single table. Sometimes you need more than one relationship, but generally you'll need at least one. Okay, and I'll give you some more examples here in a little bit. So we're going to come back over here and we're going to go create one more relationship between our orders table. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I created the wrong relationship, mostly just because I accidentally brought in that table twice. So actually I want to do that exact same thing here, but it actually is not between the orders, but the orders 1. So that was my problem. Okay, and then we're going to create one more relationship here, and that's going to be between the orders 1 table, and we're going to go ahead and go to the orders detail, matching up our order ID and our order ID in both places. Okay. So for you, it should probably just say orders, but I accidentally brought this in more than once. Okay, we're going to click OK. Now that all those tables are related, we can actually bring in any information that we want from that particular table. So if we came down here to our orders detail and we wanted to pull like our product ID down, we could go ahead and do so as well. Okay, and allowing us to be able to calculate on that particular item. Okay, and we can bring in more information from this as well as we start to explore some of the different ways that we can utilize multi-table Power Query. But this is how you essentially can create a table from multiple different places, or a pivot table from multiple different places inside of your Excel workbook. Now, when you go to create these different queries, let's come back over here to our Data tab, and let's actually delete. Okay, that's really weird. I'm not seeing that other orders connection in here. That is really bizarre that that's listed. I don't know why that happened. Okay. Inside of this queries and connections section, what's kind of cool about this is that you can actually come in here and you can modify the parameters of this particular query. You could set this, for example, to automatically update periodically. So you could set this to update every 60 minutes, so it'll update in the background. You could set this to refresh every time the workbook opens up. So let's just say you wanted to create a personal, a dashboard for your own, like something just for you and on your own. Well, you could do this. You could basically create your own workbook, import your connections in, import your data, and then basically keep this Excel workbook open, and it will automatically update requesting new data at whatever interval that you set forth. And so if you wanted to create an Excel workbook utilizing, your personal dashboard, pulling your data and pulling it into pivot tables or charts or graphs, you could do so very quickly and very easily right from this. Okay. So that's an example here, and we're going to explore this a little bit later on. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of things that you can do in Power Query, but a really, really simple example of pulling data in from multiple different database tables into your Excel workbook. So stay tuned. We're going to do a couple more of these here. Let's go ahead and explore. Okay, doing some more things with pivot tables and what that potentially looks like and how we can do some really nifty things here. Now, pivot tables are a wonderful way of being able to kind of get better understanding with respect to our data. They're one of Excel's most powerful features and functions, and it allows us to be able to calculate on large quantities of data quickly. we can, for example, pull in using Power Query specifically millions of rows of data and be able to summarize that with a pivot table seemingly like magic at a snap of our fingers. Okay. Utilizing like that ODBC, utilizing that Power Query capability, the underlying data can continue to live in its existing system, and it's just pulled through to our report that we then calculate inside of our pivot table. We can gain insight on pretty quickly. Okay, pivot tables are fast, they're effective. Most accountants have some pretty good familiarity with them in terms of how they operate. But let's go ahead and explore a couple of different things that we can do with respect to creating pivot tables, and then also some of the major characteristics that we can do inside of a pivot table. So we're going to go ahead and start here with just a simple example of how we can create a pivot table. Okay, so what we've got over here is just under our basic data section, a simple table. Now this actually is a table. We can tell it's a table because if we highlight and I just put our active cell somewhere inside of that data set, and we come up here to the ribbon on the far right, you'll see there is a contextual menu that says table design. Okay, from this table design, you can change the visual appearance of this data. You can make it look whatever way you'd like by just going ahead and selecting whatever visual appearance you'd like. Okay. The other thing I want you to get in the habit of, as I mentioned, whenever you go to create a pivot table, you create a table first. After you've created your table, something I'd like you to get in the habit of, on the far left-hand side, you'll see this option here that says table name. And I'd love for you to get in the habit of just kind of giving this a name, mostly just because once you've named it, it's easier to reference, and you can have several tables inside your workbook, table 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Well, that could be very confusing. Okay, so give these things a name, give your queries a name. That's another really good habit to get in as well. Now from here, if we want to go and create a table, it is pretty simple. What I will point out, we don't have to sort our data in advance to be able to create our pivot table. We don't have to do anything. The only thing I would tell you to do is, again, turn it into a table first, because it's going to make it life faster, simpler, and easier. And I'm going to show you why here in a minute. Okay. So to create our pivot table, lots of different ways that we can do it. From the table design menu, we can go ahead and select this option here that says summarize with pivot table. And we can also come over here to our insert menu, and we can select this option here that says pivot table as well, whatever one you feel most comfortable with. Okay. Now in this particular instance, we're going to just go ahead and come down here and click OK. And that's going to go ahead and create that pivot table for us. Now, pivot tables have a couple of different fields inside of them in terms of what they do and how they operate. And on the far right here, you'll get this pivot table explorer, okay, or the field list. And this allows you to be able to kind of calculate and create your pivot table inside of your report. Okay, and there are a couple of major areas inside of the pivot table that we should know. Okay, first thing is your X and Y axis. Okay, confusingly, columns, that's your X axis, and rows is your Y axis. And whatever you'd want to go across, you're going to put into that columns section. Whatever you want to go down, you go into your rows section. Generally, pivot tables work best when they are not super wide. So generally, I would tell you that as you start to explore creating different pivot tables inside your business for different reports and analysis, whenever possible, try to keep them from going super wide. It just makes them difficult to print if you need to print, and they also makes it really difficult to be able to read, even if you're still going to read it directly on your computer screen. So in this particular instance, I'm going to pull my columns over here to my date down to columns. That's going to go ahead and put that data in. You'll see it going across. Okay, and then we can go ahead and we can stack additional items kind of coming down in our rows section here. And what I would recommend that you do, and you can start working out, kind of what makes best sense for you and for your report. But generally, as you start to build your pivot table, you want to work with hierarchy. You want whatever's biggest at the top and then whatever's the smallest at the bottom. So if it were like product and then category, you'd put category first and then you put your product below it. Okay, in this particular example here, we're going to go ahead and pull our region down here to rows. Okay, and as you can see, as we start to build this out, it's going to go ahead and put our regions down that way. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pull our product line below region. Okay, so we can see the region being built out there. or sorry, I pulled our model there, and then we're going to go ahead and put our product line in between this. Okay. And so what we can see here is this hierarchy. We can see that we've got our region, our drives, and then in this particular case, we've got our product lines. So we've got that correct hierarchy kind of coming down. And then what we're going to go ahead and choose here is pulling our sales units down to our values. And this will now create that calculation for us. Okay. And so we are calculating, let's see how many items here, 6,192, and seemingly with just a snap of fingers, we can create a pivot table that will summarize this report really well for us. Okay. Another thing I would recommend, personally, I like the accounting format. You can access the accounting format really simply, just select the whole worksheet. And then from the home ribbon, smack dab right in the middle in our numbers section, you'll see a little comma. And from that little comma, that's going to be how we can make the numbers look correct here. Okay. So that is kind of your base generic pivot table in terms of where you would put things. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and explore a couple of other kind of cool things that we can do here with respect to our presentation of this. But this is kind of what your generic pivot table would look like. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to be able to show you is the ability to be able to group things inside your pivot table. Okay. So let me go ahead and show you this. You'll notice up top here that we actually already have a grouping present. We actually have a grouping based off of time. If we come back here and we look at our underlying raw data, notice that it doesn't have, explicit grouping based off of year, month, and day. Previously, what we would end up having to do with respect to our data, if we wanted to be able to group these things in hierarchy of time, we'd have to create a column over here. And then we'd have to write a specific function to be able to extract just the year out. We actually don't have to do that anymore, which is nice. Excel will group these things off time automatically for us. And in fact, if we come up here to where the group of time is listed and we right click on this, you'll notice there's an option here that says group and ungroup. Okay. And for our time options here, if we go ahead and we select that group option, we can adjust how this time is being calculated. We can also adjust what data is being presented here by the start date and end date. So by default, it's going to include everything. So in our case, we're getting everything from January 31st, 2020 through January 1st, 2023. But if we wanted to limit the scope and filter down to a specific subset of this, we could. Likewise, we could also adjust our presentation. Okay, right now we're displaying this based off of years, but if we wanted to include months and quarters, we can click those options. Okay, we'll click OK, and it will now expand our report and include those calculation options as well. Now, for my purposes here, we don't really need to expand upon presenting this information based off of quarters and months. That's just unnecessary. So we're going to keep it as years. That's just easier to read. But I wanted to make you aware that you can summarize these things and adjust the grouping thereof. Now, that's not also limited just to time. You can do this by creating your own grouping of your information with respect to your other fields as well, which are going to be on your y-axis. Okay, so in our y-axis here, we've got our options of our hierarchy. So we did for region, then product type, and then we did product line within here. Something I'm going to point out to you, you can also make your pivot table reports a little bit easier to navigate by collapsing different things. If you right click on a section, you'll see the option that says expand collapse in that right table, that pivot table menu here. So if we go ahead and we right click on this and we can go ahead and select, we can either collapse just this specific thing or we could collapse that entire area by either selecting expand or collapse either that specific field or that entire thing, okay, depending on what we want. So we're going to go ahead and select collapse entire field here, and it's going to go ahead and collapse all of these together for us. Let's just say I want to move my Midwest and West into one. We'll just call it the West, and South, Northeast and Southeast into another. We can also create custom groupings inside of our x-axis by selecting the field that we want. So in this case, West and Midwest. Okay, so I've selected those both. Right-clicking and selecting the group option. Okay, And then from here, we can go ahead and select our other options here, and we can also group these together, creating a second group. And so we can create our own hierarchy as well. And from here, we can go ahead and change this. We can go ahead and do this as the West, and then this one as the, well, it's best if we spell it correctly, EAST. We can go ahead and we can create that as well. And so from here, we've created our own hierarchy, and we can see that it includes its own subtotals as well in terms of what we can explore. So the grouping is something that you could do that's really helpful and useful. Thank you so much for attending our presentation and podcast for today. As a reminder, you can check out cpetoday.com for all your continuing education needs. We have courses on every topic you can think of, from accounting to audit to ethics and regulation and more. Everything you need to know to stay relevant, current, and up to date with the profession. Again, check out cpetoday.com. If you're a new watcher or listener to the CPE Today podcast, again, we offer you a free course and a free credit for you to try our services. Pick the podcast of your choosing and use coupon code ONEFREEPODCAST at checkout to make that purchase free. If you enjoyed our presentation, please consider connecting with us on social media and let us know what you think. You can find us just about everywhere at CPE Today, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. And please consider subscribing to us wherever you happen to receive your content. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and others. We'd love for you to leave a review and let us know what you think. It helps new listeners and watchers find our course and content. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for being in the office.